This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoy this Critical Thought, your daily discussion on game design. And be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and you can pitch future Critical Thought topics. We got a great Critical Thought for you today. Our topic's going to be, why do video game adaptations suck so much? And as anyone who's paid attention to the video game industry, you know there's been a number of horrible movies over the last 2 decades. Probably even a little bit more than that now. From the likes of Super Mario Brothers, Street Fighter, there's a Wing Commander movie at one point, and very lately with the Warcraft movie and the Assassin's Creed movie. You can see how interested and excited they are about being in that one. I was going to put up a clip from Super Mario Brothers, but I didn't want to scare you guys too early into 2017. When it comes to adapting a video game to other mediums, there's 2 areas I feel a lot of people get wrong and why these adaptations turn out so bad. The first is video game logic. The video game logic is essentially the rules or systems that govern the gameplay. When we refer to video game logic, this could be everything from the fact that you have main characters who can stand next to walls and recover from bullets and rockets and being set on fire. The fact that the button to open up a door isn't next to the door. It has to be 5 hallways that way, while there are zombies, aliens, parasites, cavemen, dinosaurs, mutants, terrorists, and so on standing in your way. Video game logic is an essential part of progression and the gameplay of titles, but it really doesn't make sense when we start talking about things in terms of story and plot. A good case in point would be Metroid. Samus Aran may be a badass bounty hunter, but she is the absolute worst person you could ever call to help you out in a situation. The reason is either A, she'll show up to your dangerous fight in her basic suit with no abilities, or she'll come fully loaded in her most badass form, and then the first 10 minutes lose it all. Imagine if Exterminator came to your house and said, well, I don't have any tools to help you, but let me rummage around your house. I'm sure I can find some chemicals and I can make all my stuff that way. But when it comes to video game logic, the problem is that it doesn't really help the plot and it actually detracts from it. We're just too busy focusing on the gameplay to really notice or care. A few years ago, I made a post talking about the breakdown of video game storytelling, and it had to do with the phrase, just so happens. It's how a lot of these stories tend to just devolve into arbitrary rules and ideas that break the plot. Here's a good example. The ever popular, you have an ancient amulet or artifact that will destroy the world if it ever gets assembled or if anyone gets a hold of it. But it just so happens we can break it down to 3 identical shaped pieces. And those 3 pieces just so happen to now be, put in dungeons and towers across the land. And no one knows where it is. But just so happens we have a spell that will locate them all. But the pieces have been broken up into 4 texts that have been given to the baddest enemies in the world. But guess what? Those 4 pieces, in order to get them, we need keys. And those keys are just so happen to be given to villagers who need you to do quests or solve puzzles before they give it to them. And you can just see how these layers of arbitrary BS conditions start to layer on top of each other. The other part of this is when they basically get in the way of the lore or the established setting. For instance, you have something like Doom, not Doom 2016, Doom 3, where we're in a futuristic society where we can fly to planets, we have teleporters, we have BFGs, but no weapon comes equipped with a working light, and apparently Mars is devoid of duct tape. There's that horrible movie After Earth from a few years ago where Will Smith's son had a suit that detects danger, he has a staff that turns into any weapon imaginable, but he has to make it to 3 safe points before nightfall or the coldness of the planet will kill him. Again, when you can describe the rules or the situation with just so happens, it tends to mean there's a breakdown or a failure in the storytelling. And when it comes to adapting video games, this is the issue when you're trying to explain these rules or translate them over. You have to most often replace them with something else. Now, the other area where these adaptations fail is with pacing. And pacing and video game logic, these are two topics that we can certainly explore in their own individual critical thoughts. When it comes to adaptations, the problem with pacing is that video games are an interactive medium. The player has to be doing something in the video game or it's not a video game. A 3-hour cutscene is just a fancy way of describing a movie. Likewise, if you have a movie that is just nothing but a single action scene, then there's no room for the story or the development, or the story or the plot to breathe. For instance, in Mad Max Fury Road, it was an awesome movie that is essentially just a giant car chase, but they slow things down for character development, to explain what's going on, character motivations, etc. Interspersed between these badass, car battles, essentially. But when it comes to video game pacing, again, as a game developer, you have to understand how to break up story and mechanics. When it comes to these kinds of situations, for instance, imagine if in the Lord of the Rings movie, the Fellowship had to stop their quest to save Middle-earth from Sauron because a farmer wouldn't let them pass unless they picked 8 bushels of blueberries. In a video game, that could be explained as a basic tutorial to explain controls, UI, and finding stuff in the level. But in a movie, it would make no damn sense. And the other problem when it comes to pacing is when you try to copy stories wholesale over to other mediums. Again, without the interactive part, these stories really most often can't stand on their own. Last year's Warcraft, for instance, tried to take stories that were told through 2-3 minute long cutscenes in between real-time strategy battles and turn into a full movie. I don't know how long the movie is because I did not see it. I saw that trailer and I knew enough to say, this ain't gonna work. But another case would be like Street Fighter. The movie Street Fighter, they crammed every character from Street Fighter 2 whatever edition into that movie. Now, if you were just making just a straight up movie, you would know not to overbloat your plot so much. But because it was based on a video game, we had to have everybody. Another really good point about that is from Mortal Kombat. And while they have done a lot to try to expand the lore with Elder Gods, Outworld, I don't even know what they're up to these days. The original movie had a plot point that the whole reason why they were going to take over the world was because they had to win, 12 or 13 consecutive tournaments. Why that number? It makes no damn sense. But again, this is where this trouble comes in when you're trying to copy these stories wholesale from video game to movies. Without that interactive part to sort of be the buffer, it just makes these stories feel very drab or just stupid by themselves. With the Assassin's Creed, for example, they were trying to again take the really weird plot point that you're in the past but you're really in the future and you're experiencing the past lives, when people just really care about the assassin stuff and the historical settings. And they could have done something just as a historical point. And that is actually going to take us to the final part of this critical thought. Can you make a successful video game adaptation? And this is, I think, where movies and books and TV shows get it wrong. Video games have really great stories, but it's more about the plot or the circumstance than the characters themselves. When we look at other mediums, they are usually character driven. The Lord of the Rings focuses more on Frodo and the Fellowship. Harry Potter, and all the other young adult fiction kind of things. Twilight, and that's the only mention of Twilight I'll give for this video. But when it comes to video games, it's more about these fantastical situations. Portal, for instance. You're in a laboratory being demented by a crazed and very witty AI. We really don't care about Shell, whatever her name is. We're more interested in this weird aperture. I just completely butchered that. The laboratories and GLaDOS. When it comes to Resident Evil, we're focusing more on the fact that we're in a zombie apocalypse, not that we're playing as the master of unlocking, or Chris, I punch a boulder Redfield. And this is where the idea behind video game adaptations could work. When they are taking place within the plot, but not focusing on the characters. And I'm kind of going to cheat here because a few of my friends were talking about this earlier on the forum that I visited, but I would say two really good examples of video games that could be turned into movies would be XCOM and Soulsborne. Let's start with XCOM. As we know, XCOM is not a character-driven story. It's driven by the player and the relationship to their squaddies. But these aren't flesh-out characters. They're not meant to be. In Enemy Unknown and XCOM 2, yes, we did have characters such as Shen, Central, and those characters, but we're not focusing on them. An XCOM movie wouldn't need to spend 20 minutes with a backstory of Central, or we wouldn't need a flashback of Shen, building the mechs from Enemy Within. But that situation, Earth versus aliens with an organization, could be a very interesting story. My friends were talking like X-Files meets Band of Brothers. And you could have all these really interesting situations and build characters unique to them. Imagine a squad, have a squad of characters go through a terror mission. Imagine a terror mission being fully displayed in a movie. It could, it could be its own horror movie, for instance. That could be amazing to see. And Soulsborne, my goodness. The whole idea behind Soulsborne is this organic story with the environment telling it rather than 5-10 minute long cutscenes. When you play a Soulsborne game, the cutscenes are maybe at most 5 to 10 seconds long. And even then, they don't really explain anything. It's more about you exploring these very fantastically detailed worlds and piecing it all together yourself. In Bloodborne, for instance, we could have a movie or a TV show, whatever, detailing the first hunt in Yharnam, or how Gehrman became the first hunter. For the general consumer or the audience, they're not going to be focusing on the video game and the fact that all the stuff is background. They're going to become engaged by the situation. And for the hardcore fans, yes, they know that this all takes place in the past and they've already experienced what's going to happen in Bloodborne, but they're going to get a chance to see the lore fleshed out, to see these characters in a different light and see the situation in a different setting. And again, this is why when we see these adaptations that just copy the story note by note, that it doesn't work. And again, without having that gameplay buffer, it just makes no sense. And another point would be when the game mechanics just completely overwhelm or overshadow the story. Going back to like Diablo 3, for instance, the Reaper of Souls expansion tried to make this point that you're supposed to care about Adria's daughter, whose name completely escapes me. So let's just say Jennifer Hale plot point. And there's all these different dialogue about how they're going, you must be depressed as she's dead, or don't let your anger for Adria cloud your judgment. And then Adria taunts you by saying, you're never going to see her again. And that whole time I'm just like, I'm sorry, what? I'm busy looking at my legendaries and slotting my gems. What did you say? Who died? Who killed what? I'm sorry, what was that? And then it's always like kind of like the funny thing when you have like characters go, you will never stop me, I'm unbeatable, but you've secretly been grinding levels and you have all the best gear and it's like a 2-hit kill. And again, this is kind of when the story and the mechanics don't really gel together. And when you're trying to build an adaptation around that, it generally tends to fail. Going back to the Warcraft movie, for instance, again, they were trying to tell a story that was really built around 2 to 3 minute long cutscenes in between RTS battles and turn that into a feature-length movie. A better alternative could have been, let's tell the story of the orcs before they invade Azeroth. This is something that really wasn't explored too much in the video games. I think they were trying to do a adventure game in that setting that was eventually scrapped, but that could have been its own movie. It would be a plot that is part of the Warcraft mythos, but still its own thing. It wouldn't have to rely on the video game rules or logic, because this is not something that was adapted to a video game, and would let them again explore this property further. And I think, again, to sum up today's critical thought, that is where adaptations should go. They should be based within the setting or the plot, but be its own thing. If you cannot tell a video game story, line by line, and take it to another medium, because what makes the video game unique, again, the pacing and the rules, don't translate over. For those of you watching, did you enjoy any of the video game adaptations? I'm not going to say if you hated any of them, because I'm sure we've all hated most of them. And can you think of any other good video game properties that could be translated? And again, we're not just going to talk about movies. Let's make things more interesting. How about TV shows? How about a Netflix, 12 or 15 episode season? Or even a book. There was actually a book series based off of Myths that I read back in the day, which honestly, that could have been a really good prop over there. I may actually end this video and make like a little after video image here of that book, but let's wrap things up here. So again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying these critical thoughts. If you are, be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if you have any suggestions for critical thoughts, be sure to leave them below. Once again, I'm Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Be sure to check back daily for more great content here and on GameWisdom.com. And if you haven't already thought of the vote for the I keep getting 10,000, 1,000 confused, for the 1,000 subscriber Let's Play, we'll have to do one at 10,000, I think. But for now, for the 1,000 one, be sure to leave that below. And otherwise, have a great night, and I will catch you all tomorrow. See you all then. And I'm back. I was able to find this. This is a book based off of Myths. I do not remember the plot of this book at all, but I read these as a child. And what these were, going back to the point we were just talking about, these books based off of Myths, this is not a novelization of the video game. They're not spending 3 or 4 chapters about, solving a puzzle. Instead, these books take place within the world of Myths, within these characters, and expanding things out. Talking about things and situations that were either referenced in the games or just trying to create its own lore within these settings. And as we were just talking about, that I think is where these adaptations can work. Now, honestly, I don't know if these books actually sold well enough or how well they did. Again, I played this a long time ago. Or, I'm sorry, I read this a long time ago. But they did make several of these back in the day, each, exploring these different characters or expanding their own story. It's kind of the idea, now that I think about it, regarding the Star Wars extended universe. The books, comics, and more that are dedicated to characters, places, and themes outside of the Star Wars movies, but still within the Star Wars mythos and property. And if we start talking about that, this little mini video will become its own critical thought. But I just wanted to bring that up. Thanks for watching, and now for the actual credits. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GWBycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.